and start the cafe. So welcome everybody. It's Soundwalk September. It's not long before the end of the month. We've got a couple more events coming up before the end of the month. There's some sound trails and tracks to be explored in Exeter. There's something in Berlin, and there's also something going on in London. But I'll let you all have a look at the website to check those events out. This evening we have apparently an international premiere, a launch unseen by anybody, of Colston's Last Journey, which we'll be told much more about by Ralph and Phil, who are sharing the screen. So they're the twins on your screen at the moment. We'll see who should we start with? Should we start with Phil, because he's sitting on the left? He lives on Null Island. He says he last updated his website in 2015. He's a member of SatSynth and lectures at the University of West of England, Bristol, and is a professional audio software developer and sound engineer. Ralph he writes, I'm a located audio designer and have been since 2003, though the term didn't even exist back then. I create interactive sound worlds in the areas of dramatized historical scenarios, contemporary poetry and poetry music fusions accessed through the smartphone, either as part of SatSynth, which is with Phil and composer Mark Yates, or as a solo artist using our own proprietary platform, SatSynth QR. So, gentlemen, take it away.
Yeah, I've forgotten that I was sort of tongue-in-cheek saying I last updated my website in 2015. That is true. I need to sort that. I just know the teaching takes over, right? Lecturing.
Okay. This is for me, I don't know about for Phil. It's actually quite difficult because this event, because I've been working on Colston's Last Journey since when? A year and a half?
Yeah, nearly 2 years.
For a year and nearly 2 years, and there's been a pandemic in between. I also had to have a serious operation early this year, so it's been long in development, and there's many things about it which have it's just okay. I don't so it's going to be quite, this is the first time we've talked about it, so we're not going to be particularly coherent, so please ask us questions. I'm sure we'll get better as we talk about it more. But I should start by saying Colston's Last Journey is not actually about Edward Colston. Everybody will know Edward Colston, who stood on a plinth in central Bristol for the last, Steve?
Yeah, how long has he been there, Steve?
Very long time.
That's relevant.
A couple of 100 years, etc., etc. And was famously toppled on the 7th of June 2020 and thrown into the harbour. So there's been a long discussion in Bristol. Well, there's a long discussion before that event, and there's been a long discussion since about the role of Colston and about the whole transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans and Bristol. And I should mention that this Colston's Last Journey is funded by the Arts Council and supported by the University of the West of England Regional History Centre. Give yourself a high five there, Steve. Steve Poole, who is the academic consultant on this, and by Bristol Ideas. So it has pretty good, pretty solid institutional funding. As I said, even though it's called Colston's Last Journey, what it's actually about is not specifically about Colston. This is quite important. It's about Bristol and the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans. Also, the fact that it's an arts project, and it's funded as an individual arts project by the Arts Council. That's very important to me, that it's an arts project and it's an individual arts project. So I have to take full responsibility for the whole thing. You know, it's not being communally derived. It's not being anything else. It's my project.
Yeah, not designed by committee and
not designed
sound
by,
art.
yes,
That's it. Right?
it's my take on the subject of slavery and Bristol. I suppose in a way it's also very personal to me because my heritage covers, my childhood was in Jamaica, even though I was born in Manchester. I reverse emigrated to Jamaica in the late 50s. My father was a professor of anatomy at the University of the West Indies. So my childhood was in Jamaica. On my father's side, the family is Trinidadian. On my mother's side, it's Lancashire. And we've always called him in the family my African grandfather, which is, so my grandfather, he emigrated from Trinidad to Ghana in the early 1920s and spent the rest of his life there as a doctor. So I have Ghanaian connections as well. So it's quite opposite. It's quite, what's the word, that this triangle everyone talks about all the time. My personal history also covers this triangle. So the project is very personal to me. So it was very difficult, firstly, to do the research, and as a writer, I should say that there might be language used in this presentation, there certainly is in the app, which is nowadays felt to be offensive. Here, we're just following the academic convention that if that's the way they said it in the 17th century, then we just say what they said in the 17th century. If it's me now talking in the 21st century, I use the language of the 21st century, thus not the slave trade, but the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans. Yeah. So language use is very important. I'm aware that I'm sort of leaving Phil a bit in the background.
This is all important, like upfront stuff that you need to cover. So I'm super happy about it.
Yes. It's also, the project is, it's called Colston's Last Journey, and it actually, what we're creating is a soundscape which covers the whole area of central Bristol from the Colston plinth all the way down to the other end of Perrow's Bridge. I don't know if we can show a picture on that. Or...
How many people know Bristol? Like, would it help, or would you be into the idea of us sort of calling up a map and doing a screen share of that? Let's do that then.
So I've got a map.
Let's do that.
Okay, so at the top, underneath the sort of very vague image, the washed out image of Colston, is the Colston plinth. That's where the Colston statue used to stand. Then that's on the edge of the historical Broad Quay. There used to be water all the way up to and slightly beyond where the Colston plinth is. Now the water starts a bit further down past the cascade, which is a quarter of a way down there. So the soundscape is layered over that whole area all the way to Perrow's Bridge. You can see at the bottom of the screen. And at the edge, you see a gigantic splash, of course, which is where Colston.
I couldn't figure that out when I looked at that first, but that's a sploosh. Okay, yeah, that's lovely.
Yes, you cannot, I don't know, you cannot deal with the absolute horridity of, of what all this was about without, I don't know, we'll call it humor perhaps, but anyway, I mean, it was,
with a horridity on one side and levity on the other. You need that. On the other. You do need that.
You need that. So, so there's a sound, there's a sea of sound. Phil and I have created a sea of sound which covers this whole area, and it's in the conceit is that it covers the area the Colston statue was dragged. Now, pedants,
that's the inspiration. That's why it's Colston's Last Journey, right?
Pedants are going to pull me up on that because, of course, he was pulled down. That he was actually dragged down
on this side,
that side. But it's the usual thing when you're making soundscapes. you cannot, you have to deal, if you want to put a sound in a location, it has to be in a place where people can hear it and where you get good reception.
I'll be honest with you, they dragged it this way because there was a lot more footfall and it would make for better media coverage, right? It was a planned kind of thing, as in let's make a show of this, right? But if you go this way along the right, it's just a far nicer walk. There's a lot of wider pavements. There aren't cars there.
Yeah. So there's a sea of sound which covers this whole area from the Colston plinth to the other end of Perrow's Bridge. And afloat, and the sea of sound is fragments of facts, statements, recreated dialogues, names of captains, slave trade statistics, etc. These sort of moan in, they whisper in, they twirl in and disappear. They arise out of the sea and disappear back into the sea. On this sea of sound, there are 7 ghost ships. And these are based on actual slave ships which sailed from Bristol in the 18th and in the 17th century, started some in the 17th, most of them in the 18th. So these ships, I know for a fact, sailed either from Broad Key or from one of the keys in what is now the floating harbour. They sailed from Bristol for the west coast of Africa to pick up enslaved Africans, and then went to the West Indies. So initially, I did a great deal of research in the Bristol Records Office, so I know what these 7 ships are, what they carried, sometimes how many enslaved Africans they carried. I know what their provisions were. I know who the captains were, who the crew were. All sorts of stuff from the muster rolls, which Steve Poole pointed me to. But the problem in making it was then each ship is the same, because they all did exactly the same thing. They loaded up provisions, they etc. They set sail for the West Indies.
They're part of the machinery, aren't they? Someone's turning the handle on it, so it's all just much of a muchness, right? They're all they would sound the same.
They would sound the same. So the artistic, so at that stage, I decided that each ghost ship would, instead of being specifically about what happened on that particular ship, each ghost ship would represent one facet, one element of the slave trade, of the trade in enslaved Africans. So the top one might be about African rebellion. The next one might be about the sailor experience. What did the sailors experience? How did they come to be on those ships? What did they experience? Is there anecdotal? Is there historical evidence?
You found some almost first-person accounts.
Yeah, Silas Told, for example, Silas Told, who was there. Then, of course, the experience of the enslaved Equiano and people like that. Then one ship was about it was called the floating supermarket. It was a term I borrowed from Rediker. No, I actually didn't borrow it from Rediker. I borrowed it from another author. Sorry, I don't know. The floating supermarket. What goods were traded for enslaved Africans when they got to the West Coast? So each ship represents a different facet of the slave trade. So let's say so when this is available, it will be available as an app. You download it, you go to the Colston plinth. At the Colston plinth, you enter the magical portal, the magical historical portal. You are immediately afloat on a sea of woe. We're calling it a sea of woe.
We've got like an audio clip, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got an audio clip. Yes. Okay, maybe we could play.
Maybe we could. I don't know.
Yeah. So we've got a clip of what the sea of woe could sound like.
That we had it sort of in the editor, right? So if this will work, we could flip and you could play directly, right? What the sea of woe. This is us literally editing it and arranging the sound clips. Some of these are spoken, some of these are musical, some of these are sound effects. That good level? Is that be quiet or loud? Let me know and I'll adjust.
The females of this tribe are fully as ferocious and vindictive as the men.
I heard the white demons would blind and eat me.
Kill them!
Okay.
Joy! Joy!
So this
this would
each
be
has its own story with its finger.
what we're calling the Sea of Woe, right? So it's like the holding pattern, which you hear when you're not on one of the ghost ships. And when you move in a certain direction, you'll reach a certain part along that walk, and the smartphone will automatically flip you over to one of the
When they
ghost
saw
ships.
that defeat at the hands of the crew was inevitable, they set fire to the magazine and blew the vessel up, killing almost everyone on board, as many as 300 altogether. When they saw that defeat at the hands of the crew was inevitable, they set fire to the magazine and blew the vessel up, killing almost everyone on board, as many as 300 altogether.
Cool head. First, plan. We make plan. If I meet a lion, let it be like ocean water. If I meet a lion, let it be like ocean water. If I meet a lion, let it be like ocean water.
Let it be like ocean water.
They expect will be wanted for the purchase. 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 They expect will be wanted for the purchase of the number of slaves they intend to buy.
So the Sea of Woe goes on like that, right? We only got about 3 minutes just as a little sample, but yeah, that's the general plan, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, we did have a question in the chat as to the usual thing, what is a soundscape?
Yeah, that's one of those. Right.
You work in this thing for 17 years and you think,
I forget, right? We've jumped way in too deep, and you're right. Probably we should have a little bit of sort of general context about what we do as sound artists. Right? So we treat sound and space and time as kind of 3 mediums to work in. We like to put, what is a sound artist? I guess somebody who works with sound, right? Expresses their art with sound. So we like to place sound in space at a very particular point in space, and to have you hear that sound in that place.
Yeah, so a soundscape, you can think of it, and something we think of it as parallel sound world. There is a parallel sound world overlaid over a real world location, which you can't normally hear. But if you're in possession of this magical device, the smartphone, you can download our app to your smartphone, and then what we do is we place sound in this parallel sound world. We place sound over physical objects. We embed sound into the very landscape and you can find them with your phone. That's the simplest explanation.
It's very hard to describe
hard
in
to
words,
describe.
and maybe that's your
Yeah.
point, because I noticed that you kept sort of asking deeper and deeper questions, which is yeah, insightful, a good technique, right? What is sound? Yeah, I get it very difficult to describe that with words. You have to feel it, don't you, right? And with this stuff, you have to have experienced it. It's very tricky.
It's an entirely different way of treating sound. Normally we think of sound, you go and put a CD on the CD player. No, nowadays you don't, of course. You dock your iPhone and play it from there. You switch on the radio, you go to a concert hall, you go to a concert, you go to an event, and you hear the music. This places music, sound, audio, anything like that into the actual environment. You have to go out and look for it, and it's site specific. It's what normally only plays in that particular place. So our soundscape, Colston's Last Journey, will only play, you know, the main event will only play if you come to Bristol and go to the Bristol city centre.
We are planning a version.
What's this? What is sound?
That's what I meant. Like,
Bloody hell.
so you were asking insightful questions that sort of led you deeper into the psyche, which I thought was brilliant.
Is audio any better?
Yeah.
Is audio any better? Are we using binaural sound? No. This genius here has created a platform in which the instrument of producing the sound is your bodily movement within a soundscape. So the sound is not just simply step into a sound pool, hear the sound. It's how the sound behaves, how the audio, how the music, how the poetry, how whatever else you can create with the voice and music and song and words. It reacts to your presence. If you face one direction, you get one thing. Face another direction, you get another. Perhaps hold your phone up, you get the voices of heaven. Hold your phone down, you get the voices from hell.
Yeah, and you're right. I saw a couple of people in the chat were talking about sound art and differentiation between fine art, and yeah, this is a great conversation. Maybe we should go there and take it away from the work. Yeah, we're treating a soundscape as something artificial, something that we're creating, as opposed to something which exists that you can kind of passively receive.
Yeah. But where did we get to? We played parts of the sea of sound. So you enter enter the magic portal at the Colston plinth. You are afloat on a sea of sound. You can access this parallel sound world through your smartphone and headphones. Whilst you're afloat on this sea of sound, literally afloat, you can see, if you look at your screen, you can see where the slave ships are.
Yeah, as a sort of like in a schematic map, right? You can see like your blue dot, like you might see on a maps kind of navigation app, and you can see where all of the sound ships and would be. You can navigate. You're there. I don't know, Professor Trevor Cox. No, I should check that.
Yeah. So
can I just jump in? Are you going to share more screen, or are we into the sort of kind of discussion? Because if we're into the kind of discussion, it'd be good to get people to unmute themselves and actually speak there.
Yes, like we're at the cafe, right? So yeah, maybe we should. Yeah. Do we have more sort of prep that we need to show? Or
it's just if I could just finish that sentence. You're afloat on the sea of sound. You navigate towards, as you would on an ocean, you navigate towards one of the slave ships. When you board one of the slave ships, then you experience the aspect of the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved African, which that ship represents. Then you leave that slave ship and you're on the sea of sound again. So you progress through the soundscape as if you're on a boat, going onto the ships, leaving the ship, continuing on your journey until you get to Perrow's Bridge. You cross Perrow's Bridge, you go to the other end, there's an almighty big splash, literally. And that's the end of the soundscape.
What I'm really excited about is the idea that each of those ships are like scenes in a play, which bizarrely are playing out in different rooms in the theatre. So we'll have a timeline, and we'll arrange each particular thing, like the slave's experience, or the enslaved experience, and also the sailor experience, and then the statistical kind of scene. All of those scenes are playing out. They're just in different rooms of the theatre, and you can kind of go in and out of them.
Yeah, that's very good.
You know, you'll be there maybe at the end of a scene, and then another thing will start, and all the while being whisked back and forth between the sea of sound and one of the ships. Yeah, but I think you're right, Andrew. I think there is more stuff that we have that we could show if it comes up, but I'd be very happy to take questions. And
yeah, I don't want to disrupt your flow. If you if you wanted to show more shared screen, but I was just going to think that it'd be good to get the conversation going.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know whether people realise, but they can change the view of what they're looking at, so they can actually have the screen practically full of Phil and Ralph, or you can do that in the top right-hand corner of your Zoom screen. I haven't actually tried immersive yet, but perhaps we should try that as well. But if you have it on gallery view, then you see the people who have got their videos on. But of those people who haven't got their videos on, don't worry, I'm not forcing to put your video on. That's not the point. But if you want to shout out, yeah, Simon, do you want to wave at us, or do you want to, now you've got your audio working, do you want to actually ask a question?
Not yet, but thank you.
Oh, okay.
Kindly no.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, Bob's got his hand up.
Okay, these are all completely new words to me, and I haven't. Are you talking about things like cyberspace and virtual reality? Is that the sort of what you mean by a parallel world? Because I'm finding it rather difficult to follow what you're talking about.
Emphasis with virtual reality on the visual, that you almost like you're strapping a screen to your face, right?
Oh.
And that everything you see is artificially beamed into your face. But this is like artificial orality, right? That you're putting on some headphones, and maybe some sounds that you're hearing blend perfectly into the natural soundscape that you're hearing, so that which is why actually on all of our works we introduce a very clear warning that you should watch out for traffic and like be aware of your surroundings, because it's very easy to lose track of where you are, right? You're putting on these headphones and you're distracted orally, not so much visually, but yeah, you can.
So you're literally in the area, that area that you've described as a soundscape. Are you in that area when you've got your headphones on?
Yes, definitely. You're physically there. Yeah.
So it's not somewhere you're not like looking at a TV screen. Okay.
No, but you
be careful not to walk into the water and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the kinds of disclaimers that we regularly put on our works, right? Because yeah, especially in urban areas where there is and the weird kind of urban planning practice of shared kind of occupancy, where there's cyclists and pedestrians at the same kind of on the same space, right? Yeah, a recipe for an injury if you're not fully aware of your surroundings.
I've got loads of questions, so but can I ask one more before how the two things relate, i.e. the actual environment that you're in, the actual space, and the cyber, the whatever, it's parallel space that you're in? Is there when you say there's indeed sort of sounds, sort of natural sounds in there, and there be an element of the sounds that are there blending in with the sound that you've created, what is that about? And do you have any observations? I mean, how does that evoke a feeling in that area? Is there like a presence of evil that that gave rise to racism and colonial history and all of that? So is there something indigenous in that area that's held in some sort of psychic way or something that you can sort of touch into? These sort of questions are things I'm interested in because it's fascinating.
Well,
that's a great question. Yeah.
Well, I think a term I learned not too long ago is hauntology. That's which means a type of haunting by events that happened in that environment, as you say. It's called, I mean, Bob, it's called located audio because it's located in place, and it's located in the place where an event happened, or which is redolent of, or which is which has the feeling of what happened there. So in that sense, it is a type of tapping into the ghosts of things which happened there and bringing them to life again through audio. Yes.
Yeah, because
I would agree with you that the trace of something like that is most redolently collectible within an audio context, because it's one of the most 5 basic of our senses. So you're onto something. I could.
Yeah. That's why we don't have, as Phil said, we try not to have people wandering through just staring at your screens. I was really quite disappointed by the latest. Did anyone experience the Story Trails thing with Unboxed, that huge public money fiasco? 120 million for this Unboxed scheme, and there's me thinking, oh bloody hell, just give me 1/100th, 1,000th of that and I'd make something much better than wandering around with your stupid. Sorry, I'm gonna go completely ballistic
looking at a screen,
looking at a bloody screen, you know, and things which are not relevant to the environment. The point about it is my practice as an artist, my practice as a walking artist has always been about place. And these technologies are the ideal way of putting content in place which is relevant to that place, redolent of that place, hauntology, the hauntology of that place.
So it's an equivalent, if you're a painter, of making a mark in oil colours on a canvas. An equivalent in the 21st century is having your headphones on and having sound animate the area, and
possibly
that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Great questions, Barbara. Really making me think. It's great.
What I was going to say is I'm not, you know, I used to live in Bristol, but I can't remember the route you're taking. I sort of vaguely have a memory of it, but you know, is there because Colston, the statue that was chucked in the water and made the big splash, you know, is there other kind of public sculpture on that side of the harbour wall that even, you know, gives you an idea of the proportion of the ships, or the, you know,
yeah, there's Neptune.
Yeah. I mean, not really. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know, the kind of thing that I liked what you were saying, Phil, about the fact that each of the ships in the parallel world is a room in a theatre where acts are going on concurrently or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
But actually, I'm imagining, or envisaging rather, that the soundscapes pools are considerably smaller than the ships. I mean, you know, I live right next door to the Cutty Sark, so I'm sort of kind of familiar with a tea trader, which wasn't ever used for enslaved traffic of enslaved Africans. I understand, but it may have been. But you know, that's a fair chunk.
That's a very big ship, isn't it?
Yeah, that would fill up
around the corner, and then there's
it would fill up most of the space you're talking about. So you know, but I'm wondering whether there's anything in the physical urban planning, because I mean, Harbourside, that whole kind of area has been completely designed by, you know, George Ferguson or you know, his lot, you know, all being architectured into existence, if you like. So I was just wondering whether there was anything like that. What comes to mind, for example, is that when you go into the centre of Munich, they've created stumble steps, and these are cobbles that are raised, or curbs that are raised specifically to make you trip. And when you physically trip, or you physically feel that, you are reminded that you're stepping into a property which was taken from you know, a Jewish family. So you know, the physicality of the urban environment, they've actually created something in it. And I was just wondering whether Bristol had started to think or process that, because that is very, you're right down by the Arnolfini, aren't you? You're all down in that kind of section, aren't you? So
this might be an unpopular opinion, but it seems to be that they're either in denial, or at least in the suppression kind of stage of not really acknowledging it, to the point where they sort of are starting to rename things that have Colston in the name, as opposed to acknowledging and coming to terms with it. They're kind of sort of sidestepping, it seems. Like I said, this might be an unpopular opinion and perhaps we shouldn't go there, but certainly they haven't done the stumble steps kind of thing.
Well, there is, of course, the Bristol, there's the History Commission. I don't know, Steve, if you're a member of that.
I am. But I mean, I would say that the statue, the falling of the statue has created obviously a worldwide furore. Certainly, it's still, it's still causing a furore in Bristol. But the statue itself will now reside in the Shed Museum in perpetuity, with a contextual display all around it. Quite an extravagant thing. I mean, that's going to be Bristol Museum's big installation for the coming year, and the thing which is causing the most upset at the moment, I think now, is the row over what we do with the bloody plinth. The plinth is a protected monument. The council can't just take it away without applying for permission to remove it. And it's like there are complexities around it because it's a protected monument. And then so there's been a bit of debate in the city about whether or not to put another statue on it, or a series of statues like the fourth plinths in Trafalgar Square. But the problem, of course, is that it's a toxic site. Whatever you put on it will always be associated with Edward Colston and Bristol's transatlantic slave trade legacy. It's a bit of a problem, and I imagine that digital solutions are perhaps going to come to the fore, actually. Can I ask a question, actually, Ralph and Phil? It does look like a really, really great soundscape. I think it's going to be very interesting to try it out, but I'm wondering how you're thinking of getting the message out to the good people of Bristol and beyond that this thing is there and that they might want to go and try it. It's like these things are hard. You can't see them. People don't walk past. You don't get a lot of kind of passing traffic going, oh, I want to have a go at that, because no one knows what everyone else is doing. You can't see it. And it's not that easy to advertise. So how do we get it?
650.
Yeah, okay. Yes, obviously. First, the entirely practical, that there is a marketing consultant associated with the project.
Yeah, and it isn't us, which is good. We're not good at that. Really hard.
Two, it's supported by Bristol Ideas and UE Regional History Centre. I've had long discussions with Bristol Ideas. I should say to everybody, is it used to be the Bristol Cultural Development Partnership. They run a whole wedge of massive great events every year, to which international speakers come and talk about a whole range of topics to do with everything under the sun. So they're a big sort of cultural development organisation in Bristol. They're running something next year, which is called Bristol 650, which is 650 years of Bristol history. Now, I'm not quite sure where they're measuring the start of Bristol's history of that 650 years from. But
the point which ends in a nice round number, of course. That's
yes,
what I'm doing.
So we're piggybacking on that. It's quite frankly, it's the usual experience of an individual artist. As I started off by saying, I'm an individual artist. I don't have a publicity team behind me. So the opportunity to piggyback on my partners' connections and to get the message out there that it is here is going to be quite crucial in opening it out. What we haven't talked about at all, Phil, is the statues.
Oh yeah. So
we haven't talked about that. Yeah.
So, in addition to the actual Bristol, we'll call it an iteration or a version or a flavour, right? Where you have to be in Bristol. Obviously, there are many, many more cities in the UK alone, and certainly worldwide, where the transatlantic slave trade has some sort of connection, right? And there may even be monuments like the Colston statue, and all over the world. And so our idea at this stage is to do a version which can work anywhere in the world. That you can
which we have actually done. We've actually done a demo, which we can show you.
We have a demo.
We can show you the demo
that you could try anywhere in the world, and we'll share some information about how to get that later. Obviously, it's really demo-y stage at the minute, but yeah, that's another way that we're hoping to raise awareness of it. Is to say that you know, anywhere in any major city, you will have some connection to this massive phenomena.
Yes.
And go there and open the app and listen to a flavor, a version of what you can hear in Bristol.
Yeah, I also ought to say, just to cap that the actual launch, when it arrives in spring next year, I'm going to have a gazebo. We're going to have a presence down in the city centre where we will be encouraging people, where we'll be talking to people, telling them about it. We'll try to get media buzz around that. So that people will come and actually say, oh, this looks interesting, let me try it. Also, as Steve says, yes, it's not a problem. It's just a characteristic of the medium that it's invisible. So what we're also talking about is perhaps a way of creating some sort of receptacle, which Splash and Ripple did, for example, in
Ghosts in the Garden.
In Ghosts in the Garden, but in our case, it wouldn't have the technology in it. So if you imagine it, we're thinking of creating some sort of object which looks of the age. You put your phone in it,
like a sextant or
and
a
then
compass,
you use that. You use that. So it's a way of visualizing, of making something which is not visual.
Yes, because one of the problems that I'm thinking about from like a punter's perspective, right? You hear about this thing and you're like, yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll give it a go. You then have to start jabbing at your phone and going to the app stores and downloading an app and installing a thing. And the magic that intrigued you in the first place of sort of going to this place and being transported to another time and having these dramatic scenes kind of unfold in that place is momentarily interrupted by an annoying part of technology. If there was some way that at the launch, as part of the Bristol 650 Festival, there was an object that you could put your telephone into, it would then restart that magic, and then you'd be fully on that journey, right? You'd be clipping your phone into this bizarre sextant kind of construction, or arranging your phone on this very beautifully 3D printed kind of compass or something or other that you don't get to keep because that's ours, but for the purpose of the journey. You know, you're off on this adventure, right? And it really would have a sense of adventure about it. An object, you know. I don't know quite how we're going to pull that off, but we've got a while before we need to think about that. I was just reading the chat. I was catching up. I'm confused. What's going on with the 1373 obsession?
It's when the city got its charter status.
I see. Gotcha. I see. So you get 900 years of city rights. I see. Okay.
Yeah, that's Utrecht. Sorry, that's like, and so it's just saying it's the same as in Utrecht this year. They're celebrating 900 years of city status, and it's a big deal. I've got a question though, actually.
Yeah, sure.
So unfortunately, because my audio wasn't working, and I'm not great at lip reading, I missed the first 12 minutes. So unfortunately, I've only got, I haven't got any great technical questions, but as I was just thinking about, someone mentioned Hull, and then I was thinking about this could work in the northeast, but maybe instead of slave ships, maybe it'd be mines.
Yeah.
Because, for example, when Black Lives Matter kicked off and the whole Colston thing kicked off, and some people were like, oh, I just can't understand this. And it was almost implied that you had to choose between being white working class or Black Lives Matters. And I was like, I totally get this, because we have streets named after people that had kids down mines in the Northeast, and they sit on big statues looking down on people because they were filthy rich, but they were, by all accounts, awful people. So that's maybe something you could look at. But the question was, and forgive me because I came in late, but I just noticed that the music and the voices to me were black people, and I just wondered, and I was just conscious looking around that we're all white people, and I want to ask you about this, the sensitivities of dealing with that, because obviously you don't want to do you know, cultural appropriation and what have you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question.
Well, for starters, I don't know whether you missed my introduction, because
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I have footsteps in all 3 continents, personally. So I was brought up in Jamaica. Well, my childhood was in Jamaica. My father's family are Trinidadian. I've got Ghanaian connections, and I've got Lancashire. Yeah,
Amazing. Yeah,
Lancashire connections. Yes. So what else can I say? So it's personal for me as well, but it's also personal in the fact that it's an individual artist project, and for me it's very important that that word art is in there. So all I can really do is try and make a work with integrity, which speaks to my consciousness of how this should run. And I'm making the work as an artist. I'll say that again. It's a work of sound art. So
yeah, I wasn't trying to, you know, ask you to justify or catch you out or anything. It's just, you know, it's just something that popped into my head, and something.
Yeah, it's a question which other people would ask, right?
If I was doing it, how would I approach this? And you know, yeah.
It's tough questions. You're right, Because it's a tough topic.
I approach it as a citizen of Bristol, who's quite, I think, by now fairly well known for engaging with historical questions to do with Bristol. I've done a lot of work with Steve Poole on all sorts of things around that.
I mean, I have a little bit of it here in Hackney with, you know, when I'm talking about the 43 group, for example, or you know, Afro-Caribbean culture and reggae, and I'm like, oh, I don't belong to any of these. Or even, you know, women's history. Someone once suggested that I go, well, why are you talking about women's history? So it's just it's interesting, but I think you answered it well, and yeah, thank you.
Great.
Well, sometimes I'm not quite sure about this term cultural appropriation. Like, are you going to accuse Bob Marley of culturally appropriating Senegalese music?
Yeah, I think Nîmes in France wants its jeans back, I think.
Yeah.
No, that's my music. Yeah, long discussion, and something I've given much thought to over the past year and a half, so I can't really unpack it here. Yes.
Besides, I'm just reading the chat and seeing if there's questions that we should come to. Besides the actual production, are you expecting additional outcomes? That comes on the part of this. Yeah, do we want people to do things?
Yeah, and perhaps I just want to say also, I use authentic histories, right? It's every script I've written, which has been voiced by the actors, is based in authentic histories. And in researching this whole topic, slavery is not something which white people have done to Black people. It's something which people have done to people. Some of those there were certain aspects of the slave trade on that side of Africa, with the industrialization of slavery. But in fact, just as many slaves over longer, enslaved Africans, perhaps over a longer period, were trafficked up the east coast of Africa by Arab traders, and from the interior of Africa by Black Africans. So that is a very difficult thing to broach or discuss. We can't even begin to unpack it now. But just that statement, slavery is not something done by white people to Black people, it's something done to people by other people.
that really, yeah, that's a nice succinct way of starting that discussion, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really difficult. It is really difficult.
And I agree. Like you said, it'd be really difficult, and perhaps it wouldn't do it justice if we started unpacking that now. So yeah, without wanting to sort of
no, totally. I didn't want us to get bogged down. I think you more than answered my question. So yeah, like that's great.
But it's such an important question. It's difficult to like want to put it down, isn't it? Right? Once you pick it up, it's like it feels like you're not quite doing it justice by putting it down. So I'm nervous to stop it but move on. But yeah, who else was asking?
We could show them. So we could show them a bit of the statue. We've talked. I don't know if do we want to just because we've said, Phil has said, there's two aspects to this. One is the main drag, which will be based in Bristol next year. The other is the statues. We're calling it the statues version of it. No, it should be in. There's even a video, isn't there?
There a video?
The video of the sample.
Oh, do you want
no, sorry, no, that's no good. Should we go back into the?
Do you want the Unity thing? Is that what you're on about?
Yeah, the Unity image, maybe.
Yeah, so I'll do another screen share if I can figure out where the heck the zoom button's gone. Have we got a? Oh, I see it's over here. Well, that's cunning. That's just to confuse me, isn't it? Right. Hopefully you can see this. This is a screenshot of our editor, how we design the physical layout part.
Sorry to interrupt you. First, can we show them I just remembered we've got the image which will be slide 2 in the images.
Yeah, perfect.
Which is so
that's even better.
Yeah.
Schematic as opposed to the detail. Yeah. So yeah, you made this, so I don't
I
just try and talk through it.
Graphicalized it up. So what we're calling the statue iteration means anyone anywhere in the world can go to a statue of a slaver, or they can go on to a heritage property which they happen to know was associated with slavery, or in fact they can do it in their local park. You open the app there and it lays down a version of the Bristol soundscape around that particular statue. So here,
wherever you are.
So in the example, this is the Gray statue in London, Gray's Hospital, not Gray, Thomas Guy, sorry. And around, so the Sea of Sound will roll itself around your position. Say you're in the middle, and you can see, in fact, in the demo, not 7, we've only got 2 ships so far.
Yeah.
And that's what Phil is now going to show.
Well, that's what I was just, my other image, which I pulled up too soon because I was confused about which picture we wanted to show. But, okay, that's zoomed in. Yeah, this is our editor. So this on the left, this is what you will see on your smartphone. And everything else on the screen is what we see as the artists when we're putting this stuff together. And so you can see there's a big schematic arrow of you. That's where you are right now. And there's no map, obviously, because we don't know where you are,
but you know
where you are. So wherever you start will be in the center of this grid, and as you walk in different directions, so if you walk to the green spot, you'd hear one of the ships. That's ship 1. If you walk to the red spot, you'd hear another ship. That would be ship 2. So and if you're anywhere in the general sort of dark blue area, you would hear the general sea of sound, of which we played a clip earlier, right? I'm beginning to slightly regret showing you this screenshot, because so much of it, the rest of the screen, is kind of irrelevant to the artistic experience that we're talking about, and is purely just like the mechanisms of making it, right? There's so much of it is the editor.
I was wondering, Phil, I don't know how we're doing for time.
Yeah, have we got time?
I was sort of wondering, you know, that really crap video I made?
Oh yeah, we could do that.
Why don't we just show them the really crap video?
Would you like to see a really crap video? Put your head in your hands now if you would like to see. Let's do that.
So we built this thing in Unity.
Am I still screen sharing? I want to make sure that I am doing that. I have a sneaking suspicion I might not be. I am. Okay, great.
And when you get to the start screen, you'll see Colston's Last Journey demo. Stress it's only a demo. This is the alpha version. We're letting you have a preview of. So anywhere in the world, you go where you want the scape to unfold, say around a statue of a known slaver or on a property. You open the app and it will say begin. Press the begin and you're immediately afloat on the sea of sound. The whole soundscape locates around your present position. Told you it was a crap video.
And this is a crap video because we didn't balance the levels, so all the narration just dies under the, the really bad.
You then navigate it in the usual way. Now I'm moving backwards. Of course, if you move out of the sound zone,
if you go too far,
you will simply stop. Then you move again into the sound zone.
Ready to undertake any hazardous enterprise, including insurrection.
So afloat on the sea.
The Swift,
sound.
Old Calabar, 9 men lost to fever.
And I think that works, right? I think that would give a flavour of the kind of thing that you would experience in Bristol, but it has none of the hauntology that we talked about, right? Maybe it does.
Well, I think it's hauntology. Like when you, where are we? When you enter when you actually
find a ship,
slave away in the find a ship. So I'm wandering around and see a sound.
He cuts his own foot with his finger.
I guess we're heading for this green zone.
The green one is a ship I can actually see on my screen.
Softly, catch a monkey.
I can see these coloured blobs, which are two
In
ships
single
out of
percentage
7.
the fatality amongst Bristol slaving crews could be shown to be higher than that of their human cargo.
2 ships afloat on the Sea of Sound. Enter, go aboard.
100 men jumped off the Prince of Orange after they had been released from chains upon the docking of the vessel at St. Kitts in 1737. 33 refused assistance from the sailors and drowned. They were resolved to die and sank directly down.
So the sound is spatial, it moves around.
The cause of the mass action, according to Captain Japhet Bird, was that one of the countrymen of the enslaved came aboard and jokingly told them that they would be blinded and eaten by the white man.
I mean, get out of the ship. Oh, never mind. Okay. Okay. Sorry for the crap sound balancing, but you get the idea. You can unroll this thing around a statue of anywhere you want in the world. It will start to play around you. You can see these 2 demo ships floating on this Sea of Sound. Maneuver to one, you get this brilliant whoosh, which you stole from.
Oh yeah, the sound designer for that TV show on Lost had this brilliant way of transitioning between scenes, of having this whoosh.
So just kind of whoosh, and you're into completely different audio world.
Yeah.
Leave the ship again, you go, whoa, sorry, in reverse. And you're float on the Sea of Sound again.
Away.
So that's how the international version works. And what we can do, we've made the demo is actually available. If anyone wants to try it out, please leave your email in the chat, some means of connecting with you, and we'll send you the demo version. We'd really appreciate it if people download this and try it out for themselves. Firstly, tell us whether it's working or not, and 2, just what you think of it. But please be aware it is a demo. Please be aware that the language use is 17th century, 16th century is not what we would want to hear nowadays. And also be careful of big red buses and holes in the ground and dogs. The cyclists, those bloody cyclists.
You don't want to trip over a cyclist while you're being whisked away.
Yeah,
on a
so
ship.
if you're interested in that, leave us your email and we'll send that to you.
Great stuff. Thanks guys for putting the details in the chat. That really helps. We'll send out a mailing list with instructions on how to get it. If you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you're pretty much golden.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I was going to say, if you pass me the details, then when I do a sort of email.
Oh, that'll be best, won't it? Right. Okay.
At the end of the day, and I thank everybody for coming and tell them there's a crappily edited video of the whole show. You know, and I can, so that'll give you 24 hours.
Perfection is overrated.
Yeah, 24 hours, get the
Confusion is best.
I'll distribute it, and people don't have to tell us what their emails are in the chat, although Helen and Bob have done that already. But yeah, no, I'm happy to do that.
And yes, Bob, absolutely. If you have further questions, I'd be super happy to chat, because yeah.
I must say, I really like the way that you picked Guy's Hospital. I'm not quite sure. Was Guy another slave owner or something? Or
yeah? Yes. Well,
right. Okay. Well, I mean,
just anyone in this country who can say they're not had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Oh no. I'm sure there are plenty of people that had something to do with it, but whether it actually. But what I was going to say, choosing that is quite interesting. If you wanted to do a hauntology of something, Guy's Hospital, that square would be a great place to do it, because architecturally the buildings were designed based on the recommendations of Florence Nightingale and her belief of miasms, and that you had to create space above people to have proper airflow. And so you'll find the buildings are double height. So you know, the wards are all double height, and I could really see that you could bring in John Keats, you know, and Keats could have a conversation with Guy or whoever, or with Florence Nightingale, and you could have this kind of intergenerational mishmash going on. Be a great place to do it.
I mean, that would be another great soundscape to do. We should talk.
And you've got a sea of woe with all these poor people in the incarcerated in the hospital with their dreaded miasms around above them. Anyway, that was that.
You send me the funding, I'll do it.
I've got another question. I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. And it's something I'm working on at present, so it's relevant. It's a bit long. You have a sense of something different in different places, and this is not imagined. Is there something active in the specific place that is an active element? It's something that most people aren't attuned to, but it's a sense that you can develop to more sensitivity. Hauntology, for example. I know as a kid I was terrified of the dark, and also certain places like graveyards. That was an active element of my daily experience. Is this a sensitivity we tend to increasingly ignore as we get older? Is there potential to activate hallucinations as the medium? Neurology teaches us that our visions is controlled hallucinations. So I'm trying to make, because Cézanne was the artist who was working, I believe, with hallucinations. And that's an area that I'm interested. I just wondered if there was anything in that interested you.
I remember vividly trying out a recording session in a space that we knew we were going to locate the sound. So we got the voice actors to be in that space, and we performed the scene. And the acoustics of that space were such that there were quite a lot of sort of slap echoes, like you'd shout and it would slap back at you a bit later. You'd hear a kakak, kakak, right? And so when people were yelling this scene, they were looking for somebody. They were looking for a character named Hylas, and they were screaming his name. They were looking for Hylas. They couldn't find him. And so there was this echoing.
Hylas was Hercules' lover.
Yeah. And these were the Froom maidens. These were the maidens of the River Froom, and they were looking for him and calling his name. And we played that sound file after having recorded it back in the place, and it was an auditory hallucination. It sounded for absolute real, like they were right next to you. And it was a very vivid experience, and it stays with me now. It was like they were there. I guess it helped because I was there doing the recording. But like binaurally, that was utterly convincing, and it really got me into the story of the Froom maidens looking for the lost lover.
Looking for the lost. Yeah. And to add to that, Bob, I'm slightly worried about that because yes, because hauntology, ghostly voices, etc., etc. I'm quite worried that if I make a soundscape in a graveyard, for example, that the dead will actually start speaking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Exactly. And I'm wondering if there's a link with the sound hallucination with the visual hallucination, because I'm a visual artist. That's what I'm particularly. Is there any way to make that link? Because on an electron level, sound atoms comprise form. So this is the Vedic scriptures teach this. So there must be some sort of connection.
Yeah. A sound which could trigger. Yeah.
What does he mean?
I wonder.
I was terrified as a kid of actually seeing something, and it's scaring me to death. It never happened. I had that fear.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to chip in there actually, because I don't know anyone remembers Morty Quarian. They were on Twitter. It was actually Simon Bannister and I can't remember who else it was from Brighton, and they worked in community. Matthew Eastill, that's right, and they worked in community safety. And one of the crucial areas that they wanted to reduce antisocial behaviour was in graveyards. So what they did was they created first of all, a sound art installation, because one of the graveyards fortunately had a red telephone box. So you went into the red telephone box and the phone rang, you picked it up and you would be speaking to someone who was in the graveyard.
That's
or
fantastic.
You go the other way, which is you could dial people up in the graveyard and they would talk to you. Or the third way was that you could go into the graveyard and encounter these different people. And that was created as a way in which they wanted to encourage people to visit the graveyard.
Yeah.
Because what they wanted young people, mums, children, all sorts, because the best way of getting rid of the antisocial behavior is to populate it with people who aren't the antisocial behavior makers.
Right.
So that was the whole idea. And then what they started doing, this is where, Bob, you'd love it even more, was that one of the buildings adjacent to one of these graveyards was a former stable, and the owners were what's the right word, arrested eventually, because they actually didn't keep the horses well and the horses died. And what you hear as you walk past some of the wooden doors is you hear the sounds of the horses trying to get out of the doors. So and that was all kind of done, paid for through Brighton City Council.
That's public art. That's beautiful, isn't it? Right.
Community safety to try to populate, and that was an installation. I don't think it's ever been geocoded. I think it was just done as a kind of installation with speakers and triggers like sensors to trigger it.
But I love that very physical kind of like signifier of the telephone box, right? You're walking into this space and there's an object which you would not expect to be in a graveyard.
Yes, the TARDIS.
I just love that image of scaring the shit out.
It is outside the graveyard. Yeah. It's outside the graveyard. I'm not really explaining, but it's literally on the pavement. It's literally on the pavement beside the graveyard. You've got telephone box, railings, graveyard.
Graveyard, beautiful. Yeah, what a lovely
There's also how many of you have heard of a TV program called The Stone Tapes?
You seen that? It's like mid 70s, maybe possibly early 80s BBC.
I think the plot is that something horrible happened in this house, especially in the cellar. And the voices of the people as these horrible things happened were so horrific that the actual voices were imprinted into the stones themselves.
It's more than the voices. The premise is that these scientists are going to look for a new recording medium because it's the explosion of mag tape, right? It's the explosion of magnetic tape, and they're the new Philips, and they're trying to make a new magnetic tape. But they've discovered something amazing, like you said, that something happens and it imprints. The act of it is imprinted on the stone. The memory of it. Like, so you go into that place and it's like you're hallucinating the thing, but it's recorded in the stone as experience, not as something written, as experience. That's so cool. Yeah, if you've never seen it, Bob, like the stone tape is absolutely.
When
Yeah, amazing.
I taught special needs, and I got permission from Cardinal Hume and everything, but I took the kids into a graveyard. We did all at night time, and we did all the acting there.
Amazing.
Terrifying.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, vivid, I should imagine.
Yeah, we could perhaps, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm still on this visual and oral experience at the same time. Phil and I were, before pandemic, it sort of put a stop to it really, working with what she call herself? What does Tracy call herself?
I guess visual artist or printmaker.
Printmaker. We're working with a printmaker, and the collaboration consisted of making loads of minute holes in one of her prints and putting light sensors behind which triggered sound. So the idea was that her print would be displayed in a dark space, and we would give the audience torches. When they shone the torches on the artwork, then the sound came out.
I was hoping that we could put speakers in unusual places in the room.
I mean, it wasn't located audio.
Like maybe like under the floor, so you'd be shining your torch around and discover a piece of art in the corner. And
what you should do is go into museums and booby trap them. So every time someone takes a photograph of an oil painting, a spray of red paint comes out and covers it.
I kid you not, Bob. We booby trapped the Dulwich Picture Gallery at one point, where we actually put a sound in the Dulwich Picture Gallery, and we got the painting to tell an alternative story of the painting rather than what the curator had written as the.
Oh, very nice.
Very
interpretations.
nice. Very
I love the red paint idea. I'm thinking of the Beatles' Help, where they get marked with red paint.
Well, I studied method acting, and we used to do that. Go into the public, into the gallery in LA, and take on the character, and then sort of walk out as the character, and it was freaking people out. You know,
that's wonderful. I love that. Yeah, great. Man, how are we doing for time? Are we all good? Or?
I mean, basically, how it works is we keep going until the last person standing.
Until they're all bored.
Seriously, if the conversation or the questions, start to lag, which they are beginning to lag, we might sort of say, well, we'll wind it up in about 10 minutes, unless anyone's knocking at the door and wanting desperately to make it going longer. I mean, but the answer is yeah.
I'm available. I was only just wondering. I was just looking at the clock and wondering if it was a set time, but no, that's good.
Well, I mean, I don't know. There are a few people who've not, chipped in vocally, but they may not. They may choose only to use the chat. I think it covered everything that we touched on the chat.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good. I mean, what I'd like to say is one of the things you mentioned was the story trails thing. Don't worry, I don't want to spend too much time on them. But I mean, Robert, you're steeped in being involved in app making and located media right from the beginning, as you sort of said in your I read in your bio. But I mean, Bristol is the hub of where so much sound work and located media and all sorts has gone on, and in all its time it's had the most fantastic theatre companies there, and I was about to say the persuasive studio, but
persuasive media
and all the rest of it, are you finding or that there's a huge amount of competition for space? So, I mean, I'm assuming depending on how many apps you have, you could just keep overlaying Bristol with all sorts of things. Has anyone actually sort of kind of worked out how many different sound, walks or, sonic maps or, I mean, for example, our winner from last year's Soundwalk September Awards, was he a winner or a shortlister? A Bristol chronicler is someone who walks through his childhood neighbourhood. We've got at least 2 or 3 archival pieces which are in Bristol. There must be dozens, because the been hundreds of students.
Well, no, you know, Andrew, I'm afraid you just have to move here. There's nothing for it.
I mean, wasn't it where Memoryscape was invented?
Mediascape.
Oh, Mediascape.
Mediascape, Hewlett-Packard Labs in 2003. Yes. When am I allowed to big myself up?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So okay.
Can I stop you if you try?
Me and Liz Crow created the world's, as it was called then, the world's first audio play for an intelligent environment, 1831 Rat. And I think Steve Poole was a consultant on that project, which has started a long and fruitful collaboration in many ways. I think it's because Bristol has, yes, it has 2 universities. I noticed this the other day when 20,000 new students hit the streets. Yeah. And it's quite a small city, really. So it's got these 20,000 students milling around. It's got these 2 big universities. It's got the, as you say, the pervasive media studio. It's got Bristol Ideas. There's something about Bristol and Bristol artists, if I may dare say so, which is very spawned a very creative environment. I mean, there's people like Duncan Speakman, who's well known for making in the audio work field.
I have to warn you, actually, Ralph, I have a piece in along the Brunel Mile. So, so I made an audio piece along the Brunel Mile. I don't think it's geolocated. If I remember rightly, it was sort of worked out on how fast it took a lame duck to walk the distance, I think,
Just dragging their beak along the line.
We normally use feet or meters or something, but from now on we'll use how far a lame duck can walk in 10 minutes. That's pretty good measure. Yeah.
Permaculture as well.
Yeah, and then there's, the moment there's something running which is called Playable Cities, which also was a pervasive media studio, Watershed, and we've got the Watershed, which is a creative hub. We've got Playable Cities, which we have an application up to at the moment. I think there's a lot of media people live in Bristol. Of course, there's the BBC wildlife unit, or whatever they're called, natural history. It's a media city. A lot of semiconductors and chips are made in Bristol. There's a lot of engineers around. It's somehow a very creative and
your engine management unit in most cars are designed by a Bristol company. And I maybe taught some of the engineers involved in this bizarre.
So I'm going to put this in. And pleasingly enough, it now seems to be becoming less segregated, if I may say so, because compared to London, it always seemed to me to be, okay, the Jamaicans live down there and the Somalis live there, and etc. So, but
a bit segregated, wasn't it?
Yeah. But yesterday, or was it the day before, I went to a Black Artist cultural event at the Red Lodge in Bristol, and I then wandered up the road and popped into a Chinese cafe for lunch, surrounded by Chinese speakers. I suddenly thought, wow. Yeah. Bristol is actually becoming a bit more, am I allowed to use the term nowadays, multicultural? Yeah, so there's a mix going on, which is very creative and positive feedback.
Okay, well, I mean, I think we're kind of sort of drying up. So, if anyone wants to have one last shout, get in there. Bob wants one last shout. Yeah, and then we'll give Ralph and Phil the chance to say the last words, and we'll wrap it up.
Great. Speaking up for Bristol, 1963 there was a feature film, Some People, with Valerie Mountain. That so culturally and with movies too, it's got a history. I just wanted to put that.
Oh, that's a brilliant film too. It's got David Hennings in it. Apart from anything else.
Right, isn't it? Some people say that kids today have gone astray and so on.
You even know the song. That is fantastic.
I want to see that. It's not popped up on my radar. I had no idea. I'm definitely gonna.
I have the DVD, Phil.
Oh, can I borrow it, Steve? Next time I see you. Great.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what else. I don't know what to say to wrap it up. Actually, that's an interesting point. Like, what should
No, just two things really. One, the statues demo. Yes, we'd be delighted if people can download it and try it out wherever they are and feed back to us. And two, the main events will be launched next year as Bristol 650. I'm not quite sure what this Bristol 650 lark involves, but doubtless it'll be on road.
Sort of early days for planning.
Time, but that'll be spring. That'll be spring next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, was that your last word? Was that your last word?
I think so. No, globule is the last word. It's a great word to end on.
Okay, well, what I was going to say is I'm going to switch the recording off, and then I'm going to invite the people who are hidden behind the screens to come out so that they can wave goodbye.
Oh,
okay.
It's always good to wave, isn't it? Right? It's good
to see. So I'm going to stop recording.